We're continuing this foundational collection of messages today. And I say it's foundational because the idea behind this collection of teachings is that we would begin to set the stage for our year. That we are looking for something different, to be different this year than maybe last year, or who we were then, and now is something different. And the idea behind this being foundational is that we're taking some steps to be better. If you missed last week, it was a good week. You missed a good one, jump on YouTube and check it out. Last week was great. I'm not just saying that because I preached. It was good, right? And so get online to catch up. I want us to start finding change in our life. Right? Hey, let me tell you about a couple things, though, before I get into it. I know it's a weird transition. I forgot. So last week, we started growth group signups. We talked a lot about connection last week. And if you didn't sign up for a growth group, we would love to have you sign up. Growth groups are for you. They're for your interaction and your connection point with other people. There's some really, really great ones, some that I'm really, really excited for. You can check out the packets at the display out in the lobby, or of course you can sign up online. You can sign up on your connection card. You can sign up out there. A million ways to sign up. Don't just write me a note, but actually sign up. We've got some good groups I'm really, really excited for. Some unique groups this time around, some different things. We're going to play some basketball. A lot of people have told me that have signed up that they're not good at basketball. It's okay. I'll tone it down. And you come, and I'll spot you. The women's group is always fantastic, and they're going to get into the Word, and I love seeing change that we see every time around. The women's group's a little different this time around, but it's going to get heavy and thick, and I love seeing change come out of there. The men's group is unique. The men's group is all happening online, which is unique with some Saturday morning breakfasts. Multiple breakfasts. I don't know. They're going to eat food in the morning and discuss things. Anyway, get plugged in for a growth group. The other thing is this. We've been talking about it for a few weeks. Today is our first ever 10-minute party. If you don't know what that is, it's a party that lasts 10 minutes. It's after service today in the room right out there. Here's who it's for. If you are somewhat new to Timberlake or we've just never met, staff's going to be in there, I'll be in there, and it's 10 minutes of just meet and greet. Let's just hang out for 10 minutes. We want to get to know you, and hopefully you want to get to know us. If you don't want to get to know us, you won't come to the 10-minute party, and we'll know who you are. But we'll keep it brief and send you on your way to lunch and whatever else. But if we haven't met or maybe you're looking for that first connection point before getting plugged in, come to the 10-minute party. We're going to hang out for just a couple minutes and hopefully get to know each other. It's going to be a good time. All right, let's get into it. This is the angle that I want to come at today. I want to ask the question, can we do better with people? And it's just a simple question. And I think it's a question that we should be asking ourselves more often. Can we do better with people? Last week in the message, I took a very small portion and I talked about the way that we love people and the way that we interact with people and the amount of comments or, emails or even just sayings right after church, things that I received after were kind of astonishing because I preached about this thing, right? And it appears as if everybody gravitated towards this one part about people. So I want to ask the question, can we do better with people? People are difficult. And I think that why last week resonated is because people are hard. For us, it's not hard to love lovable people, but it kind of seems as if most of the time, most people are not lovable, right? We know that they are, but we know that they're also not, right? It's hard to love people because people are hard. We're looking at this famous story today. If you have a Bible, you can flip open Luke chapter 10. Of course, it's in your notes and on the screen behind me. But we're looking at this famous story where Jesus is confronted by this man who needs an answer. And it's not just any answer. This man needs the answer. Here's what's happening up to this point in the story. There's all of this religion that's happening, but all of the religion is based on law and rules and guidelines, and it lacked this relationship. Jesus shows up on the scene and he brings relationship to religion. It's God's gift to us through the life and death and resurrection of Jesus. Prior to this, they lived by a written set of guidelines. And it is what it is. It's God that created this thing, and they live the way that God created them to live, based off of these 613 rules that they had to follow. Religion was really weird because they had this huge list of very practical things to relate to God. For instance, you weren't allowed to eat bats. Jesus came and fulfilled the law, and now you can eat as many bats as you want. It was on the list, right? Or if you needed to kill somebody in defense of your home, it was okay if it was at night. If you killed somebody during the day in defense of your home, you're responsible for that, right? Sin. Daytime, sin. Nighttime, kill away, right? And there's this long list of rules that they had to follow. Luke chapter 10 writes this. There's this interaction happening. On one occasion, an expert in the law stood up to test Jesus. He's an expert on those rules. Teacher, he asked, what must I do to inherit eternal life? Let me give you a little background. Jesus in his day, much like it is in our day, was speaking to a group of people that was very pluralistic in their religion. There was a bunch of people sitting around him, a very big variation of people. It's why Jesus said that this scenario happened to test Jesus, because there were two people that thought differently. You had the Romans that believed mythology. You had the Sadducees who looked at religion solely through the scope of productivity and law and rules. You had the Jews. You had the teachers of the law. And everyone is tuned into this leader trying to trap Jesus. He's testing Jesus, trying to back Jesus into a corner so that Jesus might say something to trap himself. Everyone's listening. This man asked this question, what must I do to inherit the eternal life? And Jesus says this, what is written in the law? How do you read it? He answered, love the Lord your God with all your heart and with all your soul and with all your strength and with all your mind, and love your neighbor as yourself. You've answered correctly, Jesus replied. Do this and you'll live. Jesus flips the script on him. This man goes to Jesus and he asks a question expecting Jesus to give an answer that would counter biblical law. But Jesus doesn't necessarily give the answer. He makes the questioner answer the question. And he says, what's written in the book? And then Jesus says, you've answered right. You've answered the right way. The thing that you just said is correct. And obviously we don't necessarily know all the details and motives and intentions of this guy that's asking the questions. But even after Jesus says that he's right, I think the guy was still in test mode. I think that he's still trying to get Jesus to mess up. It goes on, it says, but he wanted to justify himself. Jesus says you've answered correctly, but he wanted to justify himself. So he asked Jesus, and who is my neighbor? Who's my neighbor? It's a cultural question, though. The question that this guy asked Jesus is a cultural question. He doesn't need to know what Jesus' principles are on the guy that lives on the other side of the white picket fence, right? It's not the guy that waves when he's driving down the street mowing his grass. He's not talking. This is a cultural thing. This man knew the scripture like the back of his hand. He's asking, how do I live with people? How do I engage with people? How do I interact with people that don't live the same way that I live, that don't think the same way that I think, that don't look at God and God's perspective on religion the same way that I think? So Jesus goes on. He answers like this. He said, a man was going down from Jerusalem to Jericho when he was attacked by robbers. They stripped him of his clothes, beat him, and went away, leaving him half dead. A priest happened to be going down the same road, and when he saw the man, he passed by on the other side. So too, a Levite, when he came to the place and saw him, passed by on the other side. But a Samaritan, as he traveled, came where the man was, and when he saw him, he took pity on him. He went to him and bandaged his wounds, pouring on oil and wine. Then he put the man on his own donkey, brought him to an inn, and took care of him. The next day, he took out 2 denarii and gave it to the innkeeper. Look after him, he said, and when I return, I'll reimburse you for extra expenses that you may have. Which of these 3, this is Jesus speaking, which of these 3 do you think was a neighbor to the man who fell at the hands of robbers? The expert in the law replied, the one who had mercy on him. Jesus told him, go and do likewise. Jesus sets up this story, and maybe you know this story. This is a story that kind of transcends church, right? The Good Samaritan, the one that stepped up to help. And you've got all these people, and the Samaritan was somebody that should not have been associating with this other person, and yet Jesus says, which one do you think is the neighbor? Is the neighbor about the cultural differences that we have, or is the neighbor the guy that steps up when he needs to step up? So every person that we encounter in life, I think, is one of 3 things. I think that we look at people, number 1, as a victim to exploit. For as much as we don't want to admit it, I think that frequently in life we can look at people only in the value that they can provide for us, not the value that they actually have. What can you do for me? And people become exploitable. We look at them as victims to exploit. Number 2, we look at them as problems to avoid. I was having a little bit of an issue with a coworker once. And it's funny, I told this story in first service, and then Shana yelled at me. She came and said, you didn't say where the coworker was, and everybody assumed the coworker was here. And at some point in the story, I said he, and we only have 2 other men on staff. And so everyone in the room is thinking, Corey or Ethan? I had an issue with a coworker that was not Corey or Ethan. It was somebody that for the most part, I don't interact with that frequently. And when I did, it wasn't a good interaction. So the last interaction that I had, it was maybe not the best interaction. I didn't love what was happening. And as a result of that, I left this interaction very angry. Like I was legitimately angry at this interaction that I had. The guy he was not fun. I'll just say that. You can let your imagination wander. A couple days later, I'm driving to work, and I pull up to this stop sign, and I have no idea why this happened, but I stop the car, and immediately this interaction pops back into my head. And immediately, I was re-enraged, right? Like immediately, I just got me all fired up again, right? So I go to work, and it kind of teed off my day. And I come home, and I tell Shana about it, and Shana looks at me, and she says, you need to just quit being friendly to him. Make him know you are not a friend. And I was like, you're absolutely right. She said, don't talk to him. And I was like, I think that's good advice. And then last week I'm preaching. And as I'm talking about loving people, I get a text message during the message last Sunday, and it was from this person, not Corey or Ethan. And I get this text message, and you don't know, but I text on stage while I'm up here. But no, I got it after service. I walk out, and I'm in the hall, and I read this text, and immediately I was like, man, this guy, right? Like this guy. And then I walk out in the lobby, and somebody comes up to me, and they start telling me about how convicted they were in the message because, God's speaking to them, and they realized that they'd been doing this, and this, and they've had these interactions with people, and they're like, it's not right, and I shouldn't have been like that. I shouldn't have reacted like that. And I'm thinking, yeah, you should, man. React, right? No, really, I was like, you're right. And then I started thinking about this situation that I'm in. And so this week I decided that I would restart my efforts with this person to make things better. And I remembered Shayna's sage wisdom that she gave me. And I actually asked her this week, I said, hey, can I tell the people about that? And she said, yes. I said, I'm going to throw you under the bus. And she said, you can. And here's why. She goes on to tell me that she said that because she's trying to protect me. She said, I want to protect you. I want you to avoid these situations. And so much in life, we look at people as problems to avoid. And we look at people as problems that we don't want to take part in, because when we interact with these people, they change our day. And yet Jesus calls us to go so much deeper. We don't have to be best friends with these people, but surely we can't be enemies with these people. Here's what I've learned in life. A lot of the reasons we avoid people is because there's this fundamental issue or problem in their life, and the cure for their issue is you being in their life. We avoid people because of a problem, but because of a problem, they need people. We step out of the situation so we don't have to deal with their issue, but they have an issue and they need us to step into the situation. They need you more than you need them. Here's a third way that we view people. We view people as a person of value. We see people as people of value. This is the good one, right? Putting a name and a face on human resources allows us to see them as a person, as the person. Putting real life trauma and struggles and pain and hurts allow us to see value in those people. Last week I get a friend request on Facebook, and it was one of the most unique friend requests I've probably ever received. It was from this guy from high school, and it was a very, very odd friend request that I got. It was so odd that I immediately stood up and I walk into another office and I begin to tell somebody about this friend request. Because I had one memory of this guy from high school. I've not spoken to him. I don't really think about him. I have one memory of this guy. The one memory that I have of him is when he confronted me my senior year of high school, wanting to fight me, okay? He pushed me, knocked me off my feet. I'm a lover, not a fighter. I didn't know what to do. So I'm laying there being like, where do we go from here? It was a scene, right? And to this day, that's the image that I have of this guy. Because I have no other images of this guy. One interaction with him. So then I get this friend request, and I thought to myself, maybe he doesn't know who I am, right? Like maybe he thinks I'm somebody else. So I'm telling somebody about this friend request, and I'm walking through this story, and I'm holding my phone in my hand as I'm telling this story. My phone vibrates. And I look down, and it's a message from this guy. And so I'm thinking, what in the world is happening? Like, does he want to fight me again? Or like, what? Like, what are we doing here, right? And so I open up this message, I'm like, wait a minute, and I start reading. And this guy proceeds to tell me how he's been watching me through social media, and he's been looking at my life, and he starts to tell me how proud he is of me. And again, I was like, I think he thinks I'm someone else. But regardless, he's proud of what I'm doing today. And so we start talking, and there was no apology, which I'm still waiting for. We continued to talk, and I bet 3 different times he said how proud he was of me. And I thought, man, this is so unique. But we kept talking, and we swapped stories, and we talked about what we've been doing for the last 20 years. And in this one wild, brief interaction with this guy, he changed this perspective that I've had on him since high school. Interaction number 2 was way, way better. Here's my point. There's so much that happens outside of one situation. The panicked parent at the grocery store that can't control their kid, there's probably more happening outside of that situation. Right? The person that flips you off because you're driving too slow. They're either a jerk or there's something going on in their day, right? Your boss losing their mind on you for something random. There might be more to the story. When we start to see people, or when we start to see that people have value outside of our interactions with them, our perspective begins to change on how we see them. Because maybe their entire being is not personified by the one interaction that we had with them. Maybe there's something grander to this. There's a few steps that I think that we can and need to employ in our efforts to find value in people. Here's number one. You ready? Still with me? Choose not to be easily offended. Choose not to be easily offended. The book of Proverbs says a person's wisdom yields patience. It is to one's glory to overlook an offense. It is to our glory to overlook an offense. I was recently joking with somebody that I was in a grudge with someone else, that we were currently grudging. And they judged me, of course, but I said it. I stood by it. I was joking for the most part. I try and apply this stuff, but the fact is that people's words cut, and people's words cut deeply in us. And depending on how we handle it, we either take offense or we shrug things off. Usually, I think that we take offense. Here's my tact in not grudging with people. I believe, and I try and apply this to my life, that we think about the words someone else says 100 times more than they do. And it doesn't justify the fact that they're not thinking about their words, but the fact of the matter is, we say things that don't really mean much to us. They just mean a lot to somebody else. And so we need to understand that person probably wasn't trying to be that offensive. People are difficult. People are hard. But what we have to understand is that we are people too. We're people too. And so if people are hard, it means that we're hard too. If people are making mistakes and we're people, it means that we're making mistakes too. If people are offensive, we're people too. It probably means that we're offensive. Unfortunately, the offense leads to bitterness, and the bitterness doesn't necessarily hurt them. The bitterness hurts us. And still, most of the time, it was something that was never meant to be offensive in the first place. We're sensitive and we're fragile. The amount of times that I offend somebody at church because I can't hear on the right side of my head is astonishing, right? We've literally had people leave the church because the pastor ignored them. But the reality is that I have the hearing of a 95-year-old man. It's true. If you didn't know that, now you know. Stop being offended. Most of the decisions that we make in life would come easier to us if we would understand that we don't have to be so offended by everything. It's a difficult choice to make, and honestly, I think it's a choice that we have to renew every single day. I think every single day we have to wake up and say, I'm choosing to not be offended today. But if we can get out of the habit of being hurt, we can get into the habit of caring and finding value in somebody else. Right. On the flip side, while we're here, pay attention to the words that you speak. Be people that speak life into other people. If your sentence ever begins with, this might offend you, stop saying the sentence. Like, just stop talking. Be people that breathe life into people, that speak life into people. Watch for little jabs and criticisms of the people around you. Most people are already aware. Most people are already insecure. And most people are already trying to change what's happening in their life. So be the person that champions their change, not the person that cuts them down in the middle of it, right? Here's number 2. Step into other people's perspectives. Empathy means that we get to get in the heads of someone else. We get to visualize the world that someone else sees. This is exactly what God did through Jesus. Even more than that, God did it through Jesus knowing that it would cost him something. Philippians 2 says, in your relationship with one another. Okay, listen to that sentence. It sets the rest of this passage up. In your relationships with one another, have the same mindset as Christ Jesus, who, being in very nature God, did not consider equality with God something to be used to his own advantage. Rather, he made himself nothing by taking on the very nature of a servant, being made in human likeness and being found in the appearance as a man. He humbled himself by becoming obedient to death, even death on a cross. In your relationships with one another, have the same mindset as Christ, who did this, and this. Listen, sometimes people are just not great. People make decisions that hurt us. People make decisions that affect us, and we can overanalyze it, but the reality is sometimes people just make mistakes. On the flip side of that, sometimes people have deep-seated things that are happening in their life. They have things going on in their hearts, in their heads, and we don't necessarily know what they are. We don't necessarily understand what they are, but maybe today is the day that they snapped. Maybe today's the day that they finally snapped, and unfortunately we were on the receiving end of the snap. However, maybe today is the day that they had already decided they intend on changing. Maybe today is the day that they were going to make some changes for their life, and they're working on it. We don't know. So for a second, step into someone else's perspective. Sometimes people just make bad decisions. Sometimes they don't even think about the decisions later. We're affected, we get hurt. If you're hurt, go back to point one. Don't be offended, just move on with life. But the reality is we need to step into some perspective. Here's number 3. Avoid blame shifting. Avoid shifting the blame. If you have kids, you know what I'm talking about, right? No kid has ever taken the blame for anything, right? Mine excluded. I have wonderful kids. I'm joking. They're terrible humans, and all they do is shift blame. No, they're actually great. They have been asking all week long. Last Sunday night, they asked if they could watch me online, and so we put me on YouTube, and we watched the whole message last Sunday. It was awesome. A very large stroke to my ego. And at one point, one of the kids looks over at me and was like, "Good word, Dad." And I was like, "Thank you." They're great. What were we talking about? Oh, blame shifting. They also do that. Somewhere along the lines, we've learned that it's unsafe to admit failure. Somewhere along the lines, we've learned that it's unsafe to take on our faults. And what it does, it drives us to excuses, and it drives us to defenses, and it causes us to shove the blame onto someone else, to shove our faults and our failures onto someone else. In the campaign to have this remarkable year, we have to understand that for us, it's natural instinct for us to self-preserve. But we'll never love people the way that God intended us to love people if all we're trying to do is self-preserve, to fight for ourselves, to defend ourselves, to push blame on somebody else so that we don't take a hit. Sometimes we are wrong. Sometimes we are the one at fault. Sometimes we make huge mistakes, and the reality is that's okay. Like, it's okay that we make mistakes. In 1 Corinthians, Paul says, "For I am the least of the apostles, and I do not even deserve to be called an apostle because I persecuted the church of God." Paul wrote this, and Paul wrote most of the New Testament, and we've got this guy that week after week we look to and we read what he wrote as instruction for our life. And Paul says, "I don't deserve to be called an apostle, and even though I am one, I'm the least of them because the way that I treated the church, because I've made a lot of mistakes in my life." How much freedom would we have in our life if we learned that it's okay to simply say, "You know what, that part's on me. I made a mistake on that one. I'm at fault on that one." Think about the things that you've accomplished in life as a result of shifting blame. Like, we don't have anything. Nothing good comes from us putting it off on somebody else. Even when you get away with it, it always loops back around. Nothing good comes out of shifting blame. Here's number 4. Actively work to make difficult situations better. Actively work to make difficult situations better. Ephesians chapter 4 says, "Get rid of all bitterness, rage, and anger, brawling, and slander, along with every form of malice. It says, get rid of bitterness, rage, and anger, brawling, and slander, and every form of malice. Get rid of it. To get rid of something takes action. To get rid of something takes us stepping up and doing something. It takes effort, but in our effort, typically, we as humans are accumulators, especially when it comes to the burdens that we carry because of other people. We accumulate these burdens and we hold on to these grudges and these hurts and these pains. But accumulation is the natural result of inaction. The natural result of inaction. When we stop moving, we accumulate things that cause us to get hurt and bitter and frustrated. Our inactivity to rectify the situation simply causes us to have pain. Ephesians says to get rid of this stuff. Get rid of it because you don't need it. But as long as you are not actively moving to release the difficult situations in your life, you'll hold on to them and all they do is weigh you down. This goes hand in hand with number 5. Do the right thing anyway. No matter where you're at in this process, do the right thing anyway, regardless of faults. Romans 12 says, bless those who persecute you. Bless and do not curse. This goes hand in hand with number 4 because to do the right thing, we have to actively pursue correction. No matter where we're at in this, we have to actively pursue correction. Not cursing someone, all that takes is our inaction. Just don't do it. The Bible says don't curse somebody. All right, I'm just going to sit here and not move. Inaction will allow us to not curse somebody, but it goes a step further. It says bless somebody. Do something different. Bless someone. Not only that, bless somebody that persecutes you. Well, no one persecutes me. Sometimes in life we feel like we are not persecuted. Thank God we live in a country that doesn't face religious persecution like most of the rest of the world. We have freedom to be a part of that, but our persecution looks a little differently. It's the boss that takes everything out on you. It's the Facebook friend that has a different political agenda than you and puts it in your face. And the question is, are you capable of blessing the person that thinks differently than you? Let's go back to Jesus in Luke. He's talking to this person and he's saying, break down all the cultural divides. We don't necessarily have these massive cultural divides. You shouldn't talk to that race. You shouldn't talk to that group of people. In America, it's like, let's just get together and just do some stuff, right? That's our thing. Our persecution, our action looks differently, not because we're breaking down cultural divides, but because we're breaking down different philosophies and ways of thinking of things. Theological differences, religious differences, way that we think about political issues and society. So here's the thing, some of us need to simply exercise the reflex that reacts to people. Do you snap on people? Do you react in a way that we shouldn't? Do we curse people? And our curse isn't necessarily us cursing somebody. Our curse is reacting in an inappropriate way that God would not be represented well in. Jesus was so concerned with redemption. God is so concerned with the redemption of literally every single person that has walked this planet that he asks us as people, as Christ followers, to step into the same plan and love people and reflect the values that God places on them the way that he does. Even if their values differ than ours. It doesn't mean that we agree. It doesn't mean that it's right. It doesn't mean that maybe it's not sin. It simply means that I don't have the ability, I don't have the privilege, I don't have the opportunity to condemn them. John chapter 3 says that God sent his son not to condemn the world, but to save the world. If Jesus isn't doing any condemning, how in the world do I get to do any condemning? Right? Here's number 6. Learn to leave healthy. Learn to leave healthy. How you walk away from something says a lot about you. How you walk away from something says a lot about you. I battle this one a lot because the way that I walk away from interactions is not always the best way. I don't deal with rage and malice and bitterness necessarily. I deal with people shutting me down. I'll walk away from things absolutely torn to pieces because of a conversation that we've had. We have to figure out ways to leave our situations better than when we got in them. Right? It's not always easy. I don't know what you deal with. I don't know how you walk away from situations or the things that you battle, but we have to learn how to walk away from these things better, healthy. In Genesis chapter 13, it says, "So Abram said to Lot, 'Let's not have any quarreling between you and me, or between your herders and mine, for we're close relatives. Is not the whole land before you? Let's part company. If you go to the left, I'll go to the right. If you go to the right, I'll go to the left.'" The whole thing is that let's walk away from this situation, not worse. There's a ton of land. You take this stuff, I'll take this stuff, and we'll be fine. Why are we going into this with bad attitudes? Why are your herders fighting my herders? Why do we have these conflicts between us? Maybe we need to part ways, but let's just do it in a healthy way. Let's do it in a way that says, I respect you and you respect me. Let's part ways before things get bad. Let's trust that God has our best interest in mind and he cares about the outcome in our futures. If I don't trust that God cares about the future and the outcome of our relationships, then I'm taking the control out of God's hand and I'm putting the control in my hand, and I have a remarkable inability to control things the right way. We have remarkable inability to control things the way that God would have us control things. So here's how we do it. Here's number 7. Here's how we figure all this out. Simply follow Jesus. Just follow Jesus. Follow the example and the guideline that he set up for us. Follow the model that he built for us. When all is said and done, default. How do we default? We go back to the thing that God put in us at the beginning. We have a good nature in us. We have a nature that says, I care about you and I love you. If we are a reflection of God, then we have the ability to love as God loved. How much better would life be if we threw everything through the filter of Jesus? That we ask, is this who Jesus would be? Is this how Jesus would respond? Is this how Jesus would treat people? Is this how Jesus would receive the treatment? He didn't go at this on my terms. We signed into his plan. We signed on to the thing that God is doing in us and through us and for us. Why? Because his plan is better than ours. Goes back to control. Why in the world would I try and control something when God says, I'll control it for you? Ephesians 4 says, be kind and compassionate to one another, forgiving each other, just as in Christ God forgave you. So I don't need to figure this out on my own. I don't need to figure out how to act with people. Be kind and compassionate to one another, just as Christ did. Forgive just as God forgave you. I don't need to figure out a plan for forgiveness. I simply need to follow the way that Jesus did it. I don't need to figure out a plan on how to interact with people. I need to do it as Jesus did it. If you don't know how Jesus did it, open up the Word and start figuring it out. The entire thing is laid out right here. What happens is our life begins to get better. When we remove conflict from our relationship, our lives start getting better. Nobody likes conflict. If you do, it's a whole different message, right? Remove conflict from your life. Hebrews 12 says, fixing our eyes on Jesus, the pioneer and perfecter of faith. For the joy set before him, he endured the cross, scorning its shame, and sat down at the right hand of the throne of God. Consider him who endured such opposition from sinners, so that you'll not grow weary and lose heart. Here's what it says. It says that God did something and took on something so much worse than we can take on. He took on something so much heavier than we would ever take on. Consider him who endured such opposition from sinners, so that we won't grow weary and lose heart. Consider what he did so that we don't grow weary in the things that we're doing. Consider what he did, the one that pioneered and perfected faith. Consider what he did so that we can be better, right? Let me pray. Jesus, thank you so much.